Alrighty, everybody. This is Northwestern Mutual and Service Wire, and today we'll be having our professionalism panel. So if you guys just want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, the most interesting job you've had before starting your current career, your positions, and your company. Well, yeah.
All right, I'll go first. So that's like an off-the-cuff question. I didn't see that on the list. So I'm Mary Brown. I'm the marketing director at ServiceWire. I've been with the company about 13 years. And before that, I actually was a Marshall grad in graphic design. Many years ago, worked at an ad agency. And I guess maybe the most interesting job I've ever had would have to be at the ad agency. Everything there was just very diverse, tasks, things like that. I started in production coordination. So, I went to school for graphic design. I understood how to design on the computer, but taking that and actually sending it to a printer or a billboard company or, all the different ways that your work would get brought to life in a practical sense. So.
I'm Jeanette Tourville. I'm the talent acquisition partner at ServiceWire. Been there a little over 2 years. And before that, I was with Starbucks for 17 years in retail management. And that was a fun job. It was just different every day and serving customers and making drinks. And it's much more than just sitting on a bar and making mochas all day, but it was a lot of fun.
I'm Lydia Waybright. I am the Director of Campus Recruitment and Development for Northwestern Mutual West Virginia. So I oversee our internship program for all of our West Virginia offices. I am also a Marshall grad. Gosh, I don't know. The first thing that came to mind when you said interesting job is what's the most interesting thing I've gotten paid to do, which was probably like one time I got paid to sing the national anthem at the Wayne County Fair. So that's what comes to mind for me. Very random, odd jobs. But my job right now is definitely the most interesting, exciting, fun, different everyday type of role that I've ever had. So.
My name is Wesley Sears. I'm a financial advisor at Northwestern Mutual here in Huntington. Prior to becoming a financial advisor, I worked in healthcare administration for about 10 years. Then went back to school, did my MBA, and became a financial advisor. So I would say the most interesting job is definitely the job that I currently do as an advisor. You get to meet a lot of different people, a lot of different situations, and just getting to help those people every single day.
Awesome. I've actually worked at my parents' bakery, so I got a lot of pita and bread boy jokes from a lot of my friends growing up. So that was my most interesting job. But to start it off, what does professionalism mean to you as business professionals?
I'll go first. I think when you think of professionalism, you think of serious and buttoned up and dressed a certain way. But I think more broadly, it's coming to work every day with integrity, with excellence, bringing optimism to every project that you're on or situation you face. So just showing up really well, being there, consistency, and working hard, I think are some of the attributes I would attribute to professionalism.
Yeah, I totally agree with that answer. I think professionalism isn't necessarily one thing or one way of being, but it's acting appropriately for the role that you're in. So, it's not a certain dress code or a certain style of work, but it's being able to adapt to the style that you are in and meet the standards of excellence that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I will agree with those statements. I think the word I keep thinking of is situational awareness, just understanding, your audience and kind of, maybe researching, making sure to understand the corporate culture that you're going into, things like that.
For our business, I think ethics plays a big role as far as professionalism. And just to sum it up, I would say doing the right thing every single time, regardless of maybe getting paid more by doing something different. If you do the right thing every time, you're never going to have to apologize for doing something wrong. So.
Okay, awesome. So this panel will be split into two segments. So we have before getting the job and then after getting the job. So we have questions geared towards like job preparation, preparing for an interview, and then after you get the job, how to maintain professionalism in the workplace and interact with your peers and fellow employees. So the first question, and before getting the job, is what are the best ways in forming connections in today's world, whether that be creating a LinkedIn, joining an organization, or attending network events?
I would say it's not a either or, it's a both and. I think in our business, utilizing just online connections is not enough, but face-to-face connections are also not as consistent. If I'm at work and there's not an event that I have to go to, I can always be expanding my digital presence. So I think it's a both and I think they're both effective in different ways. But I will say if you're only connecting digitally and you haven't strengthened that muscle in being able to connect face to face, then I don't think the digital will get you far enough. But I would say both are necessary.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the answer is definitely both, but the more you can get out there face to face, look people in the eye, the better you're going to be. I mean, everybody's on social media these days, but there's just something to be said by meeting someone face to face.
I do agree. I think we are on social media a lot, but that is not always what the professional world looks like. So how you present yourself on Facebook with your friends who know you really well is probably not how you would appear on LinkedIn or in person in a job interview. So coming to those mock interview events or coming to a career fair and really doing your homework in advance and knowing who's going to be there, what do they have to offer, am I a good fit, are they a good fit for me, and really targeting people, I think is part of the way to network and make impressions at tables when we're out at career fairs or even in mock interviews we have across campuses in all departments. Those are really opportunities to network and for us to meet you for the first time and make good first impressions. So I do think the face-to-face is probably more impacting and you remember them a little longer than a name on a resume digitally. So definitely get your face in front of somebody.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I'm a big energy person, so obviously when we see a candidate's resume come in, I'll check their LinkedIn out, see if they're on Facebook. I'm always surprised at how many people don't have a LinkedIn profile. It's just, to me, another place for you to showcase beyond your resume a little bit about yourself and your skill set. But to everyone's point, I think I'm a big energy person. I need to meet someone in person to find out kind of if it would be a good fit. And I would also say a lot of times with networking and in-person interviews, it's a two-way street. You're interviewing us too. You're trying to figure out if we would be what you would expect from a workplace.
Okay. So what are the differences between good resumes and bad resumes?
That is a good question. I would say somebody who puts together a good resume, you can see kind of a story. You can see what they've been studying, where they're heading. You don't have to pick out your career that you're going to do for the next 30 years, but that you can see some sort of storyline that's forming is the mark of a really good one. You see them involved in clubs, you see them involved in volunteer activities, you see them interning, you can see them building the experience over time is really somebody whose resume stands out. You don't have to have that story on a resume, but if it's standing out, you can see the story of where they're heading. That helps. But I think anything that you think is relevant to the job you're applying for, it's on your resume as well. So if, I'm working at Starbucks, but I don't want to do Starbucks for the rest of my life, that's okay. It's your work experience. But because we as recruiters understand what it takes to do that job, we can see the skills that you're building. We can see that you're in a fast-paced environment, dealing with customers, handling stressful situations. Those are things that we can read between the lines on. So I think putting your experience down and not being afraid of it, not being the exact thing you're studying is okay.
I would second that. One of the examples I always think of is we had a long-term employee that when she first came in, her resume didn't have this experience listed, but in talking to her, I found out that she was packing parachutes on the weekend at the airfield. And I thought, wow, like that tells me a story. I know she can work under pressure and that she's detail oriented. And, so you kind of read into some of those, what may not be considered relevant to you. Again, it tells that story and we can kind of read into it what those transferable skills might be.
I totally agree. One thing I'll add about the not great resumes, sometimes I can just really tell that it's an old resume or it's wasn't edited for my job posting. So if I see someone's resume that says, I'm seeking a entry level management position, but that's not what they applied for on my posting. So I know they didn't read it carefully or didn't spend the time to adjust that on their resume. So just those little details, making sure you've thought through from the recruiter's eyes what they're going to see. That's something that I catch a lot. Or they have a hyperlink in it that doesn't click through, or just little errors that, go back and look at it from the perspective of the job employer that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, so just to sum that up in 3 things, keep it updated, right, to the specific job that you're applying for. I like to see an evolution, right? So if you started working at McDonald's and then you go to like a bank teller and then a bank branch manager or whatever, like this evolution of trying to better yourself, your positioning. And then definitely list the things that are not paid jobs, right? So the volunteer hours, the clubs, the organizations, things that you aren't actually getting paid for. It looks good.
So Lydia, you mentioned kind of refining each resume for each application you put in for a job. So make sure that it's kind of catered to the job description, and things like that really help stand out rather than just a typical run-of-the-mill basic one resume that somebody would have.
Yeah, or even just something that would be more broad and would apply, even just anything that gives me a hint that you're maybe not even actually that interested in my posting or in my opportunity. But yeah, from that perspective, I would say, yeah, if you can kind of personalize, highlight, there's different skills that are more important in different types of roles. So even if your skill set is the same list on every resume, maybe just you're highlighting different aspects of them or different aspects of your previous roles. But yeah, just be highlighting the things that are relevant to the role that you're applying for.
Okay. So what are some common mistakes you see students or recent graduates making when applying for jobs? So like, what are the biggest pitfalls that you might notice in young professionals in the interview process?
I interview students a lot, every day, and I think the biggest thing is confidence, being able to come at something with at least an air of confidence, maybe even faking it till you make it, but just like confidence that you even know why you're in this interview with me, that you're able to share with me why, what your story is. A lot of students that I meet don't really have a good elevator pitch. They don't have like a language that is nailed down that they can express their specific unique value to me and my office. And so, yeah, I would say that is something that over the last couple of years, I don't see students having that prepared, just being able to like market themselves, sell themselves with confidence and knowing exactly like how you're going to present that to your employer. So it just takes a little bit more preparation and also a little bit more personal confidence and courage.
For me, I think the most impressive interviews are the ones where they come and you can tell they've done their research. They know a little bit about our company. They have questions prepared maybe. Yeah, I think that's the biggie for me is just, when you come in and you say, do you have any questions? And it's just, no, I don't. It's kind of like, well, I don't know if they're really
Red
that
flag.
interested. Yeah, again, it's kind of a two-way interaction. We want to feel like, you're interested, you're engaged. And so when you have questions, and you can really foster that discussion, we get to know you a little bit better and you come across as genuinely interested. And I think the other thing I would say is authenticity. You said confidence, and I think a lot of people come in and they do fake it till they make it kind of mentality, but there's also, I think, a lot of value in owning what you don't know. I know when I first came out of school and interviewed for the production assistant at an ad agency, I was pretty straightforward. I said, look, I don't, have a lot of the skill set necessarily, but I'm confident in my ability to pick that up and learn it. I have examples on my resume of being able to figure it out, whether that's doing the research, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, you may not be confident in that skill set, but being confident in your ability to figure it out.
I think preparation is the key. Be prepared when you go in. Have a list of questions to ask whoever is interviewing you, because they're always going to ask you, what questions do you have for us? What questions do you have about our company, about our business? And instead of trying to think off the top of your head, come in with a list on paper, right? Nobody's going to dock points because you have a paper with questions on it. I love seeing that. So bring a list, 10 questions on it. That way you don't have to try to think of it on the spot.
Thank you.
I would just echo all of that.
Yeah. So now we're going to move into after getting the job. So are there specific skills, certifications, or proficiencies that students should focus on while in college to improve their employability in their fields? And then how can those skills and certifications set them aside from other employees for upward movement in the position?
Okay. So soft skills are key because I meet a lot of students that are very smart and very bright and very hard workers. And I can tell that from their resume. Whether it's they've worked retail, I know how hard that is, or they do a lot of extracurricular work. I can see that, but they can't actually tell me that story. So I think there's a little bit sometimes of a gap between a candidate's ability and then a candidate's ability to adapt in their professional environment. So working on those soft skills, I mean, doing things like this, connecting with employers, finding a mentor, just ways that you're thinking beyond your skill, but also how you're going to be able to apply that to getting a job, and not just getting a job, but getting promotions, getting pay raises, getting new opportunities. That, working on those soft skills of being able to share your story, introduce yourself to people, shake someone's hand, ask them questions, make phone calls, things that you might be a little nervous to do when you're first graduating. Start practicing those things now.
That's what I was going to say, is practice doing things that are awkward now so that they're not awkward when you get into the workforce, like having hard conversations or approaching somebody you're nervous to approach. Hey, Professor so-and-so, I'd like some feedback. You're going to do that in the real world and ask your boss for feedback. Or, hey, can you take a look at this report? Or can you look at my resume and get feedback and take that feedback and grow from it and not be defensive? That's stuff that really does happen in the real world. And it's much easier to take when you've practiced that, when it doesn't feel like an attack or it doesn't feel like you're defensive, that you're really looking to grow. I think having that growth mentality is something that you can practice now, even with professors, and go to office hours, go to events that you wouldn't be inclined to go to. Those are all things I avoided when I was in college. Like, I'm so nervous to go talk to so-and-so in the office. Like, I'm going to be the only student asking that question, or, you're not. And that happens in the workforce as well, where you're like, maybe I am the only person that doesn't get this, but I need to understand it to do a good job. So practice makes perfect.
I agree on the soft skills. Like when you talk about certifications and specific skill sets, I think we're prepared to teach and learn on the job quite a bit. It's that capacity to do so that's really hard to measure. And again, that's why I'm like big on energy. If somebody's going to be a hard worker and go the distance in educating themselves and furthering themselves. The one thing that you kind of hit on that I wanted to elaborate on is advocating for yourself. I think that's a skill set that, we don't talk about enough. And it's something that obviously you're doing in the interview process, but throughout your entire career, feeling comfortable talking to your supervisor about, your goals and, whether that's compensation, your role, how you want to grow throughout your career, getting comfortable having those conversations is really important. And then also, no one's going to advocate for you more than you're willing to advocate for yourself. So as a manager, I've had employees over the years who might come to me and say, oh, I really want, to grow my role, or I want to raise or whatever. And I go speak to my supervisor, or I take it up the pole. But then when it circles back around and our supervisors may ask that employee, how do you think it's going? Are you happy here? And oh, I'm fine. Everything's fine. You have to be, I can advocate for an employee, but they have to be comfortable advocating for themselves when our CFO or our president pulls them aside to have those conversations. So it's uncomfortable for sure, but the more comfortable you get with it, the better off you'll be.
So I would agree with everything they said, obviously, but I would just say practice, because COVID kind of changed the game for a period of time. Everything was Zoom. So you didn't have to, have those face-to-face conversations with people, close proximity. So just look in the mirror, practice making eye contact with yourself if you don't want to do it with someone else, to practice with. But I'll have kids come in, I say kids, but, younger folks come in and interview, and they stare at the table or the floor the entire time that you're talking to them. So just make eye contact, shake hands, but practice that with family, with friends, before you go to a job interview.
Okay. So coming off the topic of soft skills and communication, Wes, earlier you mentioned that professionality to you means doing the job well. So when seeking feedback from superiors in a professional environment, what are some of the best ways to seek it and communicate with that?
So I would just be very straightforward. I'm a pretty direct person, if you couldn't tell, but I would just, go to them and ask them, be honest with me, tell me from what you've seen so far. I've been here a month or 6 months or a year. What am I doing well? What could I do better? Right? You don't want to be in a position to where, that superior or your leader or mentor or whatever is coming to you saying, things aren't great. We're going to have to have a conversation here, right? Talk to them beforehand. Like, what am I doing good? What could I do better? Just be straightforward and ask them.
I was going to say, another thing to add to that would just be candor. When you're coming to a supervisor to ask for that feedback, if you've thought it through, probably some of the places where you can improve. And sometimes starting that conversation, it's a little bit easier if you come to the table and say, I really think I could be doing this better, or, just to kind of break the ice and get that conversation started. I think our most successful employees are probably their own harshest critics. Just a lot of self-critique, a lot of self-reflection. And I think that's a big part of it too, coming to that conversation, already knowing the things a little bit that you can improve on.
I totally agree. And I'll just add, if you ask, you have to be ready to take it. And I think you mentioned, like, don't be defensive, because they're not going to continue to give you honest feedback, your supervisors, if you can't really receive it well. So, and like you said, if you're really thinking it through and being honest with yourself, you should be aware of those things. So, professionalism is about seeking growth and trying to get better. So it's not that you have to already be perfect. It's okay to have things to work on. That's really what you want. So view it in that positive way. Don't get defensive, but just view it as opportunities to grow.
And I would say the best employees are those people who want to keep growing. That is not a sign of weakness that you didn't know something. It really is like, how I learned this, now how can I get better at that thing, and fine tuning it and elevating it. So it really is seen as a strength, not a weakness at all.
Okay. So I love that you mentioned that if you ask for it, be ready to receive it. So in the professional world, you don't exactly receive grades as how you would in a higher education or in school. So can you give an example of, or any of you, can you give an example of you receiving criticism, how you handled it, and how you utilized it to improve?
Yes. I I am a, like typical teachers achieving kid. So it was really hard for me to not be getting grades when I started working because I wanted to feel like I was doing a good job. But then when I started receiving feedback and like we work so collaboratively in our office. We have coaches. We're constantly getting feedback. So that was a really hard adjustment for me because it was hard for me not to take that as I'm not like I'm failing or I'm doing things wrong or everyone's disappointed in me. Like someone giving you feedback doesn't mean they're disappointed in you. It just means probably they're trying to help you. And what I learned was when my supervisors and my teammates stop trying to help me and give me feedback, then that's probably when they're less invested in me. So I was starting to view it in a positive way. But yeah, it was really hard for me at first. And it was also hard for me to take feedback because I felt like people didn't take me very seriously when I first started working because I was a young girl. And so I would just take everything really personally in that way. I would take it as like, you just don't respect me. Or, that was really how it landed on me at first. So that was something that I've really had to grow in. That, what, maybe they didn't respect me, but I can earn their respect. And if I continue to improve, take what they're saying and prove myself, then I will earn their respect. And I feel like that's what I've done in my career.
I'll just kind of expand on that a little. I feel like one of the things I learned early on, coming from the graphic design, I got my degree in graphic design. It's so subjective. So it was really, I spent about 9 years at that ad agency, and it was really a process of thickening my skin, checking my emotions, not taking it personally. If someone doesn't like the color green, you change the color, it's, understanding that, there are things like that are going to come up, and you just adapt to it. And the better you can adapt to it, the more you'll grow. So.
Yeah. I mean, like some of the feedback that I have gotten in my career is you're taking this too personally. So like, that's where I struggle a lot. And it's not like, someone is never saying to me like, I don't like you, or I don't think you're smart. That's not what feedback means. It, like I said, I really think it's a sign of someone's investing in you. And so it's a positive thing.
So like looking more towards, it's not a personal attack, it's more just constructive criticism on how you can be better.
Yeah, the difference between work performance and who I am as a person. If they're telling me they don't like a project I'm working on, it's not a character assassination. It is not, I think you're the worst person in the world. It's just, hey, can you do this project differently? It lives outside of my person. So my emotional attachment to this project is something I can regulate, but they're not attacking me personally. So I think that's important to differentiate of like, it's not me personally they're attacking or don't respect, or, it's living outside as work performance. So hopefully you get feedback that's about your work performance, not your personality. But I, in my young management career, got feedback about communication style. It was very sarcastic. and it was meant to be funny and playful, and it wasn't funny and no one was laughing. And that was just my 25-year-old self thinking I was like leading with joy. And my manager was like, hey, it's the ugly stepsister of communication is sarcasm. And I have never forgot that. I instantly changed it because it wasn't my intention to be sarcastic and demeaning, but it was not hitting the way I meant it to do. And so it was like, if you need somebody to do something, be direct and tell them and ask them to do the thing you're implying that you do sarcastically, and they'll do it. No one's resisting you. And so it was a good piece of feedback that I learned early on, but you hone over the seasons of your career.
So part of my role as a what we call a development director is to help new advisors become successful in this business, to train, to develop. And one of the very first questions that I ask new advisors joining our firm is, do I have your permission to give you constructive criticism, right? Because if I don't have your permission, then criticism is just harassment to you, right? So, and they always say yes, right? But it's not that we want to give them that criticism to say you're a bad person or you're underperforming or you're not doing your job well. It's like, especially in our career, we are wanting you to be successful. Like, we want you to succeed. So you just have to take it with kind of a grain of salt and don't get too upset about it.
Yeah, I think it is challenging. If you care about your work and you care about the quality of the work and you care what other people think of you, all of these things are really important, but you have to kind of flip that switch when you're getting feedback so that you can literally hear it,
I love what you said about detaching your personal identity from your work. And that can be really tricky when you're a passionate person or you really care about your work. Like we all do, I know. And so, yeah, it's a fine line, but you have to learn to regulate that, like regulate your own emotions. I've really had to learn that.
Okay. So segueing a little bit from in the workplace into externally, are manners or etiquette at a company lunch or dinner often observed and given criticism, maybe internally, less directly, but within peers, if that makes sense. So are manners or etiquette at like a company lunch or dinner often observed by employees or supervisors, and is that criticism usually direct, or is that kind of just gossip internally? Or
So in our world, it's pretty direct.
Yeah,
it's pretty direct.
okay.
I would say ours is probably a little more indirect, unless it's like egregious, but it's definitely addressed ultimately. So yeah, it definitely is observed, and something we talk a lot about internally is perception, right? You may not have meant to be perceived as like somebody you weren't, but your behavior may have indicated something else, and that's somebody's impression now of like that one time at that one event, and it's hard to come back from some of that, especially in a professional field that may offer social settings. So just remember you're still working, essentially. You're still with your coworkers, even if it's casual, and people have short memories.
Yeah, I would just say situational awareness is key in that type of environment. And I've seen, faux pas happen, in the first 6 months that haunt someone for many years. So just, be aware of the setting, be aware of the people that are around you. That would be my advice.
Okay. So Wes and Lydia, it seemed like you definitely had maybe an example without naming any names or anything
for
like
sure.
that.
And I will say one reason why we're very direct about it is our advisors are client facing. We're in the community. So if we see someone on our team that's, not maybe practicing the best etiquette around us, then we know that we need to flag that before they start acting that way in front of clients. So that's really why it's very direct for us. But it's funny because Wes is like one of the most direct people that I've ever met. And we had an event earlier this summer where we were all having a big dinner at our managing partners that he was hosting. And one of like our newer people was wearing a t-shirt and, everyone else was like really dressed up.
Mm-hmm.
And Wes ruined that guy's day by being like, hey, just letting you know, like, next time don't wear a t-shirt. But they were like on their way to dinner at that point. So he was like, it was too late. But again, like, those are some things that there might be learning curves with younger professionals. So even things like that, like, be able to take that feedback. And yeah, we're very direct about it just because we want to protect our reputation in the community. But yeah, there's definitely examples of people getting called out and feeling a little shy about it, but we just adjust, and then now he has a great style, doesn't he?
Great stuff. So kind of segueing from that a little bit too. So for like company events, including alcohol, because that's due in part a large part of business practices. Sometimes you have dinners and social hours, mixers, things like that. What are some of the unwritten rules when navigating drinking while at a company event?
Don't be the reason that that's the last company event that they held.
Yeah.
Right? Don't be that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't ruin it for the rest of us because those are fun. No, just kidding. My personal rule is I set a number of beverages per number of hours, and then I'm also like water in between, especially in the marketing role. We have events like that where an event may go on for 6 hours. And if you're not really keeping that in check, you may have too much to drink. So
Also, like, what you were saying, when you're at this event for all day, and sometimes you're with other people and you can't like try to keep up with them. Like, know your own limit.
Limits,
Like,
yeah.
don't be just kind of like, oh, you're getting another, I'll get another. Like, be super aware of it, because especially when you're at a work event, what I've noticed is, when I'm not paying for my drinks, I'm less inclined to like keep track of how much I've drank. So you really have to like think about it, be prepared beforehand to, make sure you're not accidentally going a little too far.
Open bars can be a danger. Yeah.
100%.
And I'll be the odd man out and say you don't have to drink at events where there's alcohol. If you are one of those people that know this is not good for me to do at a work event, don't do it. It's okay. It sometimes feels awkward, like you're peer pressured, but if you don't want to be inebriated with your coworkers, that's okay too. If that's a thing reserved at home, or you're not a drinker, or you're sober, or whatever, it's okay to not drink at work events as well.
I would say that's one of my biggest lessons over my career is kind of understanding boundaries. I think when I first started, I was a pleaser, and I ended up really working some crazy odd jobs. And to your point, everybody at the agency would shut down shop, and it would just be like open bar situation, and just getting a better grip on, okay, this is work, this is my personal life, and there is a boundary between the two.
So going along with maintaining kind of your own image as well, is it important to consider how one conducts themselves outside of the work environment? So is it important to remember that you're a representative of your company wherever you go?
I would say yes. I'm maybe like far end of the spectrum, yes, than some people would be. But if you're, with a reputable company for a long time, people have an impression of that company. They have an impression of what employees historically have been like. They may know you specifically, and you do represent your company outside of work, even if you're not wearing the logo or you're not at a work event. But I do think you need to represent well and not just be like two split personalities in the world. So
I would say for sure, especially in the world of social media, I know that, there are things, for instance, we have certain people in our organization that have access to our company Facebook page. And there have been things, maybe political, maybe, some things that we would not talk about as a company that have accidentally gotten posted on the wrong account and things like that. It's like, just be, and beyond that, even if it is your personal account, just know that, anybody could probably look that up, and it does, people look at you holistically. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, whether you think so or not, whether you care or not, people are going to be thinking about that because, first of all, we live in a very tight-knit community. So, I mean, I never meet someone that I'm not like at most 2 degrees of separation from when I'm in Huntington. And so rumors spread so fast in Huntington, even if they're not true, like they stick forever. So you can't help but care. You can't help but take that into account because it will make a difference, especially in a business type of setting. Like if you're a business professional, your personal network is part of your work. So, I interview a lot of students and like I see them out at restaurants or bars or whatever. So they know who I am, I know who they are. So I'm not expecting them to be like wearing a suit and tie when they're at dinner, but I am aware that we're both noticing each other in public. So that can always happen and impact. And also when you're out and about, that you might find really good opportunities to network or connect. You might be out at dinner and if you're at Peddler, like see Brad Smith and he's at the table over and you need to be ready to say hi and prepared to have your professional energy. Yeah. pull that out. So you never want to be like too far from being able to present yourself when you're around members of your community.
Yeah, I think it definitely matters. And just remember, it doesn't just matter after you have that job, right? Even before. Like when you're going to an interview, the first thing that any employer is going to do, or recruiter or HR or whatever, is look at your social profiles, right? So if you have a political view, if you do whatever, that's fine. You just don't have to post it on all of your social media, right?
Yeah.
So
You don't need to
matters.
immediately get into the loudspeaker of social media, right? Yeah. Okay.
I would just add to that. I think that on the flip side of that, we don't expect anyone to be completely, we want to see personality. We want to see your authentic self. Just, keep it PG rated, keep it, especially for us, we work across all of the US and Canada, and I've connected with people all over, and there's a lot of different viewpoints. It all comes back to that situational awareness, knowing your audience, knowing that, if I come in real strong with a point of view, people may have opposing views to that. So.
To stay fluid, right? Yeah. How do you see company culture shifting as more Gen Z employees enter the workforce?
I think it has shifted quite a bit. So a couple things. Most of the people that I interview now were in high school during COVID. So they've had a very, very different experience with transitioning into their secondary education. So because of that, we have all had to adjust. Everyone in my office knows how to use Zoom, like even the 75-year-olds, like we all have to do it. So we've had to adjust because of that. Our clients, our candidates, our employees are expecting us to accommodate virtual options. So we do that. So a lot of that, again, expectations are shifted. So again, it's not that professionalism looks like one specific thing, but in the context of a virtual selection process, there's also a way to be professional through that, even though it's virtual or you're not face to face. And then the other thing I would say is what it looks like to be a professional person is really shifting. We are still in a world that is, there are a lot of middle-aged, wealthy white men in charge of things. And our workforce, though, is really shifting. Like every company event I've been to is very, very wildly aware that our workforce is shifting a lot. And so our leadership has to learn to pivot and be able to adjust their perception of professional. Because if professional means a man in a suit, then you're eliminating a lot of great talent. So I think from an employer side, expectations of what professionalism looks like in Gen Z is it might look different, but it needs to be there in some capacity. So you might be a professional in a different way than our management is used to seeing. But when you bring talent, confidence, ambition, those things will shine through. And so you can, kind of apply that new gen professionalism.
Yeah, I think it's definitely shifted a lot since COVID. It's funny you mentioned the 75-year-old. So I'll have clients 80, 85, 90 years old, and they'll call and want to schedule a review meeting, right? And I assume, all right, you just want to come to the office, face to face, and they're like, well, we can do Zoom if you want. And I'm like, okay, great, yeah, let's do it. But to kind of add to what Lydia said there. Yes, it's definitely shifting. It's going to have to shift as far as the talent that we recruit and bring into our firm. Middle-aged white guys. That's been the office forever here in West Virginia. We have a very strong push to hire, to recruit more diverse candidates now. So it's definitely shifted for the better.
I would say technology is probably a piece, not just Zoom, but in resume writing, AI is a big thing right now. There's lots of tricks around some of the algorithms that are in some of our applicant tracking systems and way to get your resume at the top of a pile. Just all these things that we are navigating now that aren't just, a person writing a resume, sending it in, and having to proof it that a computer is doing this and elaborating and creating creative language around. And so some of that is an adjustment to really learn how to read those now in a way that is not exclusive or has bias around it, but really try to parse through like who is the voice of this resume. I think that's something that's shifted, as well as just some of the technology we use in recruiting has changed as Gen Z enters our workforces.
And I'll just add kind of a different perspective on it in terms of, I think as employers, it changes kind of how we need to evolve to continue to attract the best and brightest out there. The expectations are a little bit different in terms of benefits. What younger folks are looking for may not be that pension or that 401k. It may be more work-life balance. It may be, flexibility, flexible hours, things like that. So us adapting as well. For sure.
So going along a little bit with the middle management, the senior level, older white guys a little bit. What are some things you may overlook when interviewing an applicant or just after they've been hired and how they conduct themselves in the workplace? What are some things that an older senior level manager who's been in the position for decades at that point would notice? So like whether that be like handshakes, their attire in the workplace, attitude when communicating with senior level supervisors, external partners, things like that. What are some of those things?
It's all the above that you
Yeah.
just mentioned. Your attire, your yes sir, no ma'am, stuff like that. Handshakes, eye contact. It's all of that.
I would say, body language, even if you're like, I catch myself because I get cold. So I do this a lot. And there have been points when I'm like, oh, I need to like open myself up a little bit. Again, that situational awareness, thinking through how you're being perceived in those interactions, I think is really important. We see it time and time again with people on their phones. As our president of our company walks through the bullpen regularly, and you may not realize he's walking right behind you, and maybe you're only looking at your phone for a couple of seconds, And that's when he walks by. And suddenly his perception of you is that you're not engaged or that you're not focused on your work or you're not a hard worker. And it just stinks to have that one interaction.
To
Yeah.
change a perception of how you work. Yeah. Okay. So we're coming close to the end. Do you think there's a gap between business education and real world business practice? And then what are some of those differences? And then how can we as a college prepare our students a little bit better for real world business practices?
I would say yes. Um, I was one of these students too. I did not have a plan for my career when I was in college. I was just going to school and getting a degree, and then I'd worry about what was next. So if that's you, it's okay. Get a degree, we're proud. But if there are opportunities to just prepare you for the workforce, maybe not your specific career, take advantage of those. Again, a mock interview, a career fair, see what's out there. That is the link, I think, between taking what you're learning and going, all of this is going to need to be applied somehow in the real world. And it isn't two separate seasons of your life like high school and college. It is all an arc to be used in your lifetime. And having the degree is the sword to wield for sure, but having the soft skills we've been talking about today, taking what you're learning and start applying them now and practicing them now and turning up at events and thinking about what you want to do after college, maybe not picking the career you have for the next 30 years of your life. That feels like a lot, but it's all stepping stones as you continue on. I never planned to be in Starbucks management for 17 years when I graduated college. It wasn't what I went to school for. It wasn't even on my radar, but it's in what I ended up doing. And it was a meaningful career that gave me a ton of tools, but it wasn't my plan, but I took everything I learned and applied it. So there is a gap if you aren't intentional to start marrying it now, because we're up here talking about like how can we're ready to take you and apply you, and the more ready for that moment you are ready to really start thriving in your career.
I think in a lot of business types of fields of study, I studied public relations. So similarly, there's so many options of what you can do. It's not like you study nursing and then you go become a nurse. You might study finance and you could have 100 different job titles with that. So thinking about not just the skills that you have learned from your education, but identify the things that you are good at and the things that you like, and not just being aware of those things that you like to do, but what are the career paths where my strengths and the things that I'm interested in are highlighted. So thinking about your natural inclinations, really thinking through if what kind of environment do I want to work in? I know that I know that I want to do accounting, but do I want to work remote? Do I want to work in an office? Do I want to work corporate? So thinking about how to, like you said, apply the skills to at least some just categories of what you might be interested in. I always ask students when I'm interviewing them what their ideal career is, and very few students have an answer for that. So if you have some sort of if you've put some sort of thought into that, it will, first of all, make your job search a lot more efficient. And second of all, it'll help you stand out when you're speaking to employers.
So it's so frustrating. I'll do a meeting with a young client, new client, husband, wife, whatever, and the financial literacy that they have is just like non-existent, and it's because they don't learn this stuff in high school. You don't learn it in college, really. I mean, if you're a finance major, the folks that think they're going to go to New York and work on Wall Street, they're very few and far between, right? So they come into me and, we're going through questions and they have no idea what a Roth IRA is or a backdoor Roth IRA or why they need this or that, because you just can't, you don't learn that stuff in college. And I know because I've been here. And part of the reason for that is just like every company, every firm, their products, their investments, it's like proprietary to that company. So they really can't teach that like in college, right? So I would just encourage you to do like any type of internships, any type of job shadowing, like go sit in those meetings with those, people at those companies. And that's really where you learn this stuff, right?
I would have to agree. I know for me, it was like the first couple weeks of actually working 40 plus hours in that environment is just, you can't compare to that. And, I'll give an example of a student that came to us in his freshman year. He was an accounting major. This was many years ago. And, obviously he didn't, an internship wasn't required at that point in time, but I thought it was really smart of him to take that proactive approach and say, hey, I'm just looking to, I've worked at Chick-fil-A, I've worked at Bob Evans. I want to work in an office environment and see what that's like, to really understand, am I going to enjoy this? Am I going to hate it? And so he was an intern with us for, I want to say like 2 or 3 years, and he ended up changing his major to marketing. And now we have him on full time. And I think it just gave him that, preparation, that understanding of what he was actually going after. And then to your point, finding something that you enjoy is so important. Not necessarily this is how much money I want to make, this is the title I want, but like what type of work do you enjoy? Because if it's something you enjoy, even on the hardest days, it won't feel like work.
So at this moment, we'll open it up for any audience questions for a question and answer segment. How would you guys handle like this? Say like somebody's come, they know what they're doing, but they might be blind, they might be deaf, they might have a missing hand.
Well, I'll take the disabilities one. The federal law has an entire Disabilities Act that protects people's jobs with all sorts of varying degrees of disabilities. Additionally, it depends on what role you're applying for. So if it's going to be heavy machinery that requires you to lift 25 pounds and whatever your disability is doesn't permit you to do that, it might not be the right role. So it is a tricky line of applying for the right role and what the requirements are. And it's why job descriptions lay out what the demands of the job are, is so that you can be the judge of like, oh, I'm not able to do that without feeling like you were discriminated against. But there are incredible, like very extensive protections around disabilities of all kinds.
Yeah, I will echo that. I think the federal law pretty much has us covered on that one. But as far as background checks, it depends on the company. For Northwestern Mutual, we have to background check everyone that's affiliated to our company. Northwestern Mutual runs the background check. It's very thorough. And that's because obviously the nature of our work is very secured. We are doing financial planning, insurance, and investments. So we do run a background check. And we confirm previous employment. So the candidate enters their previous work experience, and then we just confirm those. So
The background check is not done like when we receive an application, though. Like it's just
no.
prior to employment.
Yeah,
like
we would background check them after they've accepted an offer.
Yeah.
I will talk about ours. I am the recruiter for professional employees. There are additionally sites in Houston and Phoenix as well that definitely represent their local cultures, which are mostly Hispanic in those regions. In our Houston location, we have 10 languages working in our Houston plant. So we definitely welcome diversity at all 3 sites. I think our West Virginia location kind of resembles the local population as well, as hard as we can be intentional to not discriminate anybody, welcome them in for skill sets and all of the soft skills that we were talking about. So we definitely want the best people on the team, and regardless of what that looks like, or disabilities or race, religion, etc. So definitely have no problems with that.
At Northwestern Mutual, one of our biggest strategies for diverse recruiting is recruiting through campuses. So campus involvement actually is a huge part of our strategy. We know that with women and people of color, there is not only a wage gap, but what we call the confidence gap. Men will, studies show, apply for jobs when they have about 60% of the requirements. Women will apply to job when they have closer to 90 to 100% of the requirements. So we have a very strong goal of recruiting more women in the next year. And it's hard to recruit women in our role because it's a very risk-oriented role. It's very entrepreneurial. And we talk to, fresh out of college guys that are like, yeah, I'm going to have no problem with this. This sounds easy. And then I'll talk to sometimes female candidates that I'm like, I know you could do it. Like, I know you could, but they don't have that confidence. So part of my job is making our opportunity more accessible to people that might not have that just kind of natural confidence to approach a work environment where everyone there already looks just like them. So that is part of our role. And then our company in general does a D&I council with each of our network offices. So we actually did that. When was that? Last summer, maybe. And then we have those resources through our corporate office as well. So like a multicultural group, an LGBT group, a women's summit. I think there are a few others, but yeah, so they're called they're affinity groups. So we can network with other people in our company because again, in West Virginia, we don't have a lot of women. So they sometimes have to, it can be beneficial for them to be part of the Women's Affinity Summit and network with other offices that have people that might understand their needs a little bit more.
Say for context, we're also in manufacturing, which is a very male-driven industry as well. So we too are very intentional about women entering the industry. Mary talks a lot about the changes she's seen in her 13 years in that industry and have made great strides and continue to look for the same kind of demographic.
Yeah, I think to me, my rule has always been like, just, hire for, the skill set, that you need. I don't, perception is reality. And I think the way we combat that is by hiring the best and brightest candidates and not really looking at it as a male female or anything like that. I would say also, our customers are very diverse, French speaking, Spanish speaking, and so, yeah, I mean, really making sure that we kind of match that same diversity that we're trying to serve on the outside.
One big one for me is like communicating within an appropriate time frame, like responding to emails, responding to messages, calling people back. I just feel like I get ghosted all the time. It's absurd. Like, really, you can just text me back. Yeah, just say no, thank you. Like, really, when people respond to me and say no, thank you, I say thank you so much for the response, because it's very rare that I get that. So communication, yeah, is the big one. And it's just because people are nervous and feel uncomfortable. And the only way to get past that is to just do it and get more comfortable with it.
Eye contact, mock interviews, practice.
The one I'm going to say is curiosity. It's one of those kind of intangibles that you can't see on a resume, but when you meet someone, you can kind of feel whether they are intrinsically curious. Are they someone who isn't just going to do the thing, but they're going to want to know why and how does this fit into the bigger picture. You know, they're going to be curious about the context of their role, not just pushing a button or pulling a lever.
And we use humble, hungry, smart as kind of characteristics for people who do really well at our company. So you can't teach humility, you can't teach hunger, you can't teach the smart. I mean, I guess you could teach the smarts, but that you would be really doing things in a really smart way that's driven, and maintain a humility is like the perfect teammate.
Okay. Well, I think that concludes our professionalism
One
panel.
more
Oh, sorry,
question.
we have one more.
We had a speaker at one of our corporate trainings named Kim Lear, and she's a generational researcher. And one thing that she said that I thought was so fascinating is that Gen Z, older generations see Gen Z as they just want to find the easier way out. But the reality is Gen Z is all about optimizing. So it's not easier for the sake of being easier, but it's optimizing. It's being more efficient. It's that you understand in a way that maybe older generations don't, that some things don't need to be in person. Like you can do a Zoom meeting, or you can, you know, your professionalism can maybe look a little bit different. So I think there's a little bit of education that's required for people to really understand what the motivation is for Gen Z, and also understand that Gen Z is not children. Like Gen Z are our workforce now, so we have to take them seriously.
And I would say as Gen Z, respecting that there are multi-generations, millennials, Gen X, boomers, whoever, even beyond boomers, like their parents are still in our workforces too. So respecting the wisdom and experience that they have, and how can you work together and be teammates and it not be like my way is the best way to optimize everything, when they have built our company for 56 years and you come in and you're like, I've got a better way, and you're like, oh, okay, well, there's some history to know. So I would say just work together as teammates.
I would say help them, you know, prove yourself a little bit. I will use the example of an engineer that we have at our company. When I first started, it's like he would not give me the time of day, but over time, when he would come to me with a problem, or if I noticed that he was struggling with something, I'd say, you know, I know a trick on that. Let me show you how to do this. And you develop that rapport over time, because believe me, we all can use some help from each other, whether it's there. I mean, we use the term tribal knowledge a lot. We've got so much tribal knowledge within our company over the past closing in on 60 years, and those folks are going to retire. So how are we capturing that? And to your point, optimizing that.
Does anybody else have a question? No? All righty. Well, that concludes our professionalism panel. Thank you all for attending, and thank you guys for participating in the panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.